Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. And I'd like to start out with a few of the resources. I've been working with the Catholic Peace Building Network, with some civil society organizations like the Nuclear Threat Initiative, Pax Christi, and others, to continue this discussion of widening the conversation about nuclear weapons, raising people's awareness about nuclear weapons, and getting more interest in abolishing nuclear weapons. So we've got some very long www sites there that are some of the videos from some of our recent conferences. We had a meeting on the Pope and the Bomb prior to Pope Francis's visit to the U.S. in Washington in September. And we just had a meeting at the House of Lords in London. So those are the two URLs listed. The video from those conferences is available. And some of my remarks today were in a America Magazine article from last summer. So I've just put the resources up front to let you know, if you want to know more about these issues, there's some places to go. Basically, what I'd like to talk with you today is about bringing our toolbox that we have from peace building to the issue of nuclear weapons. The good news is that peace is breaking out around the world today. Now, you might not know that from the headlines, but it's actually empirically true. There are fewer wars than ever before, fewer casualties from war, particularly when you look at the high water marks of the mid-20th century with 60 million dead in World War II. Now, those weren't accidents. That was done by the very hard work of people like all of you. Pax Christi was formed after the Second World War, and many other civil society organizations, religious organizations like Catholic Relief Services, Caritas, worked very intensely on reconciliation among former enemies. And that tireless and intensive and intentional work has borne fruit. It's borne fruit in a toolbox of how to build peace, and it's borne fruit by creating better relationships among the former enemies after the Second World War. Is that peace and disarmament is not automatic. They have to be built. And we didn't take this route, unfortunately, at the end of the Cold War. To build a better peace, we need to build better relationships. And those better relationships, that's not just the job of governments to do better relationships, government to government, although that certainly is called for as well. But civil society and religious organizations absolutely have a role to play in building better relationships. To reach deeper disarmament, we have to build deeper relationships. And to build deeper relationships, we need all hands on deck. We need religious organizations, civil society organizations, as well as the official activities of governments at the United Nations and the type of meetings that Martin so ably pointed out in the last discussion. We need all of them to be able to build those deeper relationships that will lead to deeper levels of disarmament. All wars end. Whether they end well or whether they end badly is up to us and the actions that we take to reach deeper levels of disarmament. So what is this toolbox that I'm talking about that we have used to effectively build peace in many places around the world? So wars in places like Colombia, the Philippines, that have been waged for 40, 50 years are coming to an end. And they're coming to an end with the work of peace builders on the ground using effective tools that bring in participation of all the parties, with a focus on building right relationship, with a focus on reconciliation among the previous enemies and armed groups, in order to restore not just the physical infrastructure, the roads and bridges destroyed, but to restore the human person and the human relationships that were destroyed through those decades of conflict, to have a peace that's more sustainable. It's not just about the piece of paper it's written on the legal obligations, but it is much more sustainable because there are human relationships and human initiatives who want that peace to succeed. Our problem is that while we have had some very successful movements towards disarmament, as Martin pointed out, we've gone back from the brink of 66,000 nuclear weapons at the height of the Cold War to an agreement now to get down to 3,000 between the U.S. and Russia. We're not there yet. But those current arms control and disarmament treaties have focused on the stuff, on the weapons, on counting the weapons and destroying the weapons. Important, but it has not focused on building relationships among people. And I think that that's why we're at a stalemate now, why we're not getting to these deeper levels of disarmament, because we need to be focusing on that relationship building. After every other war in which we've moved towards more successful peace building, we've done a number of processes. One is an alphabet soup called DDR, and that's demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, reconciliation. We didn't do that at the end of the Cold War. At the end of the Cold War, there was some disarmament with the New START and other treaties with the Soviet Union and the former Soviet states. There really wasn't much demobilization, and those weapons unfortunately remain on hair trigger alert in those weapons sites, which was what Sister Megan's civil disobedience and public protest was trying to draw attention to the fact that these weapons are still there. They are still armed and dangerous, and most Americans don't understand that. They thought with the end of the Cold War these weapons went away. That is absolutely not the case. So you can read through the litany of nuclear accidents and the vulnerability we have for nuclear accidents, and it's just a horror story of the kind of knife's edge that we are at with these current weapon systems remaining not in a demobilized state. So what can we do to build better relationships? Well, with the multilateral processes that governments can do, there's a whole variety of initiatives, from the nuclear security summits to the proliferation security initiatives to consequence management, a whole bunch of different initiatives that have been undertaken and that need to be extended. Oftentimes those things go out of style when the politicians who began them go out of office, and there needs to be some renewed mobilization around those. But civil society and religious actors have very important roles to play. Like Martin said, I often get the pushback that this is pie in the sky to talk about reconciliation. But I think if you want to see how reconciliation is real, it's possible, it's practical, it has happened, look at what was the response to the Fukushima nuclear crisis in Japan. Here you had the United States, who had dropped nuclear weapons on Japan, had done immense casualties and damage to Japan in the Second World War. And you have reconciliation between these former enemies. Now, when they faced the Fukushima nuclear crisis and had nuclear meltdown of these power plants after the tsunami, Japan turned to the United States and asked for our help and expertise, and the United States was immediately providing humanitarian support, technical assistance, etc., to that Fukushima nuclear crisis. That is a very real example of reconciliation between former enemies. Didn't happen overnight, happened over decades, happened with the very dedicated work of many groups, including groups like Pax Christi, to that. So here's the good news, is we have seen this decline from the Cold War highs in the number of weapons. But the bad news is all of these weapons still remain, primarily in the U.S. and Russia. To get these numbers of remaining weapons down, we need to build deeper relationships. There's still a great deal of suspicion. And there are lots of activities among former Cold Warriors, people like is pictured here, former Secretary of State under the Reagan administration, George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, and others, who are now recanting their positions that they had during the Cold War, saying, you know, we got it wrong, and those weapons are more dangerous to have now. They undermine our security. They don't help our security. So there are opportunities from what you might have thought of as unlikely quarters in previous years to try to build on reconciliation and right relationship, to use these tools that have been used in war zones around the world to greater effect on the issue of nuclear weapons. So after the Cold War was over, there was some movement towards building relationships as we destroyed some weapons. There were exchanges of nuclear scientists. There was movement to turn nuclear weapons into nuclear energy. And there have been many examples of countries who have given up their nuclear arsenals and their nuclear programs. My suggestion is we need to mobilize these countries. As Martin said, you don't ask the smokers to lead the ban on smoking. You ask those who have weaned themselves from these arsenals. So South Africa, as well as the former Soviet republics, and Argentina, Brazil, these are countries who have real wisdom to share with the world, and we need to tap into that wisdom more in this efforts at building deeper relationships. So yes, take on these former state-to-state processes, but religious actors have very robust networks to build relationships, and civil society, those people-to-people processes, are very important. When politics is frozen at the governmental level, religious and civil society actors need to take the lead, need to work creatively to build relationships, and that's really the work before all of us today. So thank you for the opportunity to share, and we'll look forward to more discussion in Q&A.